Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hacking HR podcast, the show where we talk about the amazing future of human resources and all things at the intersection of future of work, technology, organizations, innovation, transformation, people, and the impact in HR. During this show, we're going to be sharing ideas, data, stories, insights, experiences, and basically anything else that can contribute to helping you become a better HR leader and practitioner. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I do hope that you enjoy this show.
Nothing like this ever happened before. It's not just that we have COVID, right? It's the fact that there's impacts on people's health. It's global. It's not something focused locally. Then you add to all of that the companies, from depending on the industry, some companies cannot keep up with the opportunities for new markets, and a few others are devastated. So how do you handle that complete imbalance? And then you add to that the fact that people have been very vocal about inequality and social injustice at the same time. It would be very easy for us in HR to just say, hey, we are victims. I mean, there's so much to do. We're overwhelmed and this and that. But I think that the opportunity here for innovation relates to demonstrating flexibility.
Nina is a global leader developing human capital strategies from the ground up to steer organizations through growth, M&A, and complex transitions. She has led talent and change management for organizations with footprint in more than 180 countries across several industries. Nina is also faculty with New York University, where she was recognized with their 2020 Teaching Excellence Award. Nina is also a member of the Harvard Business Review's Advisory Council. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Hacking HR podcast. Very happy to have Nina with me today. How are you doing, Nina?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Enrique. Excited to be here.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to have you joining me in this podcast and having a great conversation about talent, innovation, culture, leadership, and a number of other great things, if you will. So let's just begin by asking you this question. What do you think has changed in the workplace, in talent, in organizations, culture, leadership in the past 4 months? What do you think is the most dramatic changes that we have experienced, other than, of course, the craziness with coronavirus and all that?
This is the $1 million question, Enrique, because the best way I explain it, that the Chinese plates, and you have them spinning, and the artists go and tap one and the next and the next and the next. Well, basically somebody just added a ton of plates, and we are all juggling, trying to spin all of the same plates. Leaders and employees are looking at us for answers, but this is completely abnormal. There's no preconceived solution. So we are learning all together with the people who are seeking guidance from HR. And it's a very interesting spot where I also think, on the positive note, that it's probably the greatest opportunity for HR to rise as a strategic partner for the business. But workplace for now is still chaotic. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I like that you're saying that we're juggling with everything at the same time, right? Financial constraints and instability, the fact that there is a pandemic out there. And of course, there's the added, as opposed to 2008, there's the added fear and anxiety around, do I go out, the mask, I don't want to be close to people. What do I do to, stay protected and safe and healthy? So it's a lot of stuff going on. But I especially like that you mentioned that we are in a time of extreme uncertainty. And one of the things that comes with that is this lack of, baseline on how to do these kind of things. So, or how to resolve the problems that we may have in our organization. So let me bring the concept of innovation. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the role that innovation is playing in responding to the uncertainty, the volatility, the questions that we have in the workplace today?
It's funny you're talking about uncertainty and volatility. You're almost using the VUCA term,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
The volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I talk a lot about it, and in fact, because I just started a new cohort with NYU, we've been talking about dealing with the VUCA environment, right? These are people who are taking a master's program and are worried that they're not going to have jobs when they graduate. But back to your point, there's no preconceived notion, and this relates a lot to the theory of adaptive leadership. You mentioned you would be interested in my views on leadership. We humans are prone to looking at what happened in the past to look for solutions that they can adjust and potentially work in the future. Well, nothing like this ever happened before. It's not just that we have COVID, right? It's the fact that there's impacts on people's health. It's global. It's not something focused locally. Then you add to all of that the companies, from depending on the industry, some companies cannot keep up with the opportunities for new markets, and a few others are devastated, right, or downsizing. So how do you handle that complete imbalance? And then you add to that the fact that people have been very vocal about inequality and social injustice at the same time, right? It would be very easy for us in HR to just say, hey, we are victims. I mean, there's so much to do. We're overwhelmed and this and that. And I myself fight it every day, right? But I think that the opportunity here for innovation relates to demonstrating flexibility, adjusting bit by bit as we go, instead of expecting to have all of the answers to make a decision. That's not going to happen, right? I'm starting to hear, just to give you a simple example, people have been talking about going back to the office.
Yeah.
I'm also hearing now some saying, yeah, now that they announced that they're starting production of a potential vaccine, I don't want to take it right away, because what if there are side effects?
Yeah.
Right? So if before we were talking about a solution ready and that would resolve all issues with the vaccine, now people say, oh, wait a minute, right? So it's not going to be something that will have a simple solution. And there's no cookie cutter or simple one, by the way.
Yeah.
Personally, when I think about the way I can think, not just more innovatively, but also focus my efforts, let me put it this way. I like to think about what we knew was coming and what's new. So for instance, I've been working remotely and using virtual meeting tools for many years now, right? COVID only accelerated the adoption of these tools, or COVID is only requiring and having organizations prioritize investments in digitalization, right? So we kind of knew, but we were kind of taking our steps progressively, and all of a sudden we do need to do it. Another thing, this whole notion of diversity.
Yeah.
Do you know an organization that will not have diversity in their values, or say that they have, some employee association groups and specific focuses on minorities? Yes, they all do. But now we're talking seriously about what did we concretely do, right?
Yeah.
So that's my way of looking at what we knew was coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there's the extreme, which is what is new. And to me, again, on the point of innovation, this is what, if you want to stay at a more strategic level and anticipate what's coming, is what we need to do. So it relates to understanding, for instance, what all of this is doing to the culture of an organization, or how leaders are really espousing the mission, vision, and values that we say are the core of our organization, right? And, or is it the case, instead of looking inwardly, make a very honest assessment and say, wait a minute, our business is transforming, so we'll have to change our vision, mission, and values.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I like that you are talking about, some of the things that we knew were going to come. One of them, which is perhaps the one that caused the most amount of shock for organizations, was to send people to work from home. When the pandemic started here, creating mayhem in America in early March. And the concept of remote work is nothing but, it's not new at all,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's been around for a long time, but organizations and leaders tried, for some reason, they were finding so many excuses not to make it happen. And they, of course, were caught off guard. So I got a couple of questions for you, in that direction. One of them is, what do you think prevents organizations from doing what they know they have to do, but they are not doing? Because that's exactly what you're saying. It is, we knew that this was going to happen, or something like this could happen, and we could have gotten ready, but we didn't. So what is preventing organizations from getting ready for the things that they know could happen? And the second question, which is related to this first one, is what do you think how do you think successful organizations in the future will look like?
Mm-hmm. Two very tough questions. And again, you
and
have
together,
all of the
and together.
and you have all of the $1 million questions today. So I think what prevented organizations from taking faster action is the usual balance of cost and change management, right? And there's also the component of the nature of the business. So for instance, hospitals will continue to require that nurses be there for their patients, right? You cannot overnight say all nurses are working from home now. That's not going to work. No. So there's that balance there, that not everything can go remote. I was having this conversation the other day, and I said, well, it really depends. An airline will still need a pilot there, or unless something that technology evolves in a way that everything is going to be automatized, right? But having said that, there's a cost associated to it. And the fact that humans tend to be in the comfort zone, we are creatures of habit. So if it's working the way things were, you go introducing things in a paced way. And if it's not a priority, it is a nice to have, right? Yeah. Yes, we want to be the best in technology. We want to be in the forefront of logistics. Nice and dandy, but if there's no compelling and immediate reason, it becomes a secondary priority. Mm. So long answer to say why I think organizations didn't do it. Okay. Now, to think about the future of organizations, I think that contingency workforce, the gig economy, which is also not necessarily new. I mean, every organization has been hiring contingency workers for, my goodness, decades, right? Yeah. But the gig economy is becoming a little different, because it used to be in the past that contingency workers were tend to be lower level, lower skillful types of employees, temporary employees. And now, if you master a certain rare skill, you could give yourself the luxury of say, you know what, I don't want to have to be a part of just one organization. I want to leave a greater contribution, and I want to work in different projects. I want variety, right? Which is the tendency with the newer organizations, right? Millennials are starting, and I think the next generation, because they are focusing big time on the thought of how their personal values are aligning with the organizations they're working for. And I was reading this statistic the other day that my generation used to have an average tenure of 7 years in the same job. I remember a time when if you changed jobs more than within less than 2 years, the recruiter would ask you, what's wrong with you, right? Or are you fired or something? And now the average has gone down to 3.5, if I'm not mistaken, and with the likelihood of going down to 2.5 pretty soon. This is going to accelerate as well. And how will organizations ensure that they're bringing talent that wants more flexibility, not just remotely, but variety, exposure, different projects, right? That's the what's ahead, and which to me is extremely exciting.
That's, I think you're talking about a lot of great opportunities for us to think differently, about the future of organizations. And of course, there's one component that I know you're very passionate about, and it's the component of leadership and culture. Because, yeah, we can make a lot of changes happen bottom up, but they can be more effective. They can be done faster if we have leaders that are championing change. What do you think? How do you think the leadership as a concept will be evolving, not only during the pandemic, but once we get out of this? What do you think is going to happen with the idea of leadership?
Last time I checked on Amazon, I think there were over 15,000 titles on leadership.
Yeah.
And which is scary even,
Yeah.
right?
So
There's so much. And it's interesting because most organizations will tend to a handful of models. And because there's such complexity, depending on the nature of the business, depending on the industry and the generations that are coming, looking for different models of employment, I think that leadership will be a bit overwhelmed, quite frankly. They are already at this point in time. I had conversations with some leaders who were having difficulty, for instance, even planning contingency for their departments as they are.
yeah.
Okay. Because of the fact that it's not just about running the business as it is, but also because they do not know what the strategy is going to be after the year end, right? So there's that element, but also there's this component of, if the culture has to be a healthy one, and if the organization still wants to attract solid talent, leaders will need to be, on the one hand, more engaging, right? Walk the talk, espouse the values of healthy workplaces, flexibility, most importantly, as the new generations come in. And at the same time, have very clear boundaries with the non-negotiables.
Yeah.
So let's imagine, for instance, that it takes a while for COVID to really have a vaccine that's offered globally. Okay? Well, too bad, so sad. You want to come to work without a mask, you cannot come to work.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a fine line and very complex for leaders, but they will have to master change management. It's something that I think has to become part of leadership development programs, if you will.
Yeah, and I find that fascinating, because one of the commonalities in the conversations that I've been having is around the complexity of being leaders these days, but also the vulnerability, the humility, and the trust as components of that new leadership. And you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, nobody has ever been in the place where we are today, right? I mean, SARS, MERS, Ebola, 1918, influenza, that's not COVID-19. And it's not a world where we had almost 8 billion people, where we're all interconnected. And we are in the face of very complex challenges. And very often the leaders do not have the answers to that, which is okay. And one of the trends that I'm seeing in all my conversations, and I'm talking with leaders and whatnot, is how those very progressive leaders that want to manage change management, if you will, they are coming forward and saying, you know what, we got these problems for the organization. We don't know how to solve them. How do we leverage on the collective talent of our organization to do something about it. And I want to connect that to something that, of course, I want to talk to you, which I know it's, ingrained in your DNA passion, which is talent and talent innovation. Let me begin by asking this question. How can leaders effectively tap into what could be limitless potential and talents of their teams? How can they do that effectively?
Here's my personal view, because I think that you can, there's a growing trend uh, in leadership development to say that leaders are responsible for the P&L, but they're also responsible for engaging. They're also responsible for developing and assessing and this and that. To a point where I've heard people say, I don't want to be a people leader. It's overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming. And I get complaints about this, and I have to address an issue with someone who doesn't come because their parents are sick, and there's this and there's that. So it's my almost a full-time job just to do the people leadership part. Granted, they're right, because it's becoming more and more on the leader versus the old-fashioned way where HR would make the decisions and all the communications, right? But now, having said that, looking at everything that's happening around us, I do think that in order for a leader to be followed and to be credible, there's a big element of, or a mix of transparency, the vulnerability you just mentioned, but it's also the intellectual curiosity of trying to understand what makes their teams tick.
I'm writing down this idea of intellectual curiosity because it's been, I think that's one of these ideas that has emerged in a lot of my conversations, intellectual curiosity, asking, getting to know more about your team, about the organization. So it's fascinating that you mentioned that. I want to bring this conversation, of course, to the role of human resources. I know that's been part of the work that you have done in your career and in the space of talent and learning. What do you think is the role of HR in all this mess that we have gotten ourselves into with coronavirus, racial inequality, protest out there, a political system that is totally broken, the economy that is working only for a few and is leaving behind so many people? What, in your view, is the role of HR in the 2 cents of HR in fixing all this mess in which we are right now?
I think I mentioned at some point that it can be our great opportunity to show how we are strategic, right? And the challenge almost becomes ourselves, taming ourselves. Because if you just pay attention to everything that's in the media, and a lot of it has been negative, I'm not sure why, but a lot of it has been negative, and let yourself surrender to the fact there's this chaos and no one, not a single individual on the planet has all of the answers, it's easy to feel helpless, right? Yeah. But the role of HR, in my opinion, is to help bring stability and bring some vision of normalcy to the organizational complexity, okay? And possibly working hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with the C-level to make sure that they too are espousing that same type of approach that is more flexible, that is looking for solutions together, that's open for perspective from the employees, and that genuinely care about everybody's well-being.
I like that because, like you said before, one of the, we are creatures of habit, right? When we are thrown into a world that we don't know, we fly, we fight, we run away,
or
freeze, and it becomes increasingly difficult for us to make sense of all this craziness. So I like the idea of HR bringing some sense of normalcy. For example, I guess one of the examples of that would be, well, working from home is the new way of work. So now, how do I provide the resources, the information, the equipment, all that is needed so that people know that that's the way we are going to be working? Is there any other example that comes to your mind when it comes to HR bringing that level of normalcy and I don't want to say comfort, but at least, yeah, normalcy to the work that people are doing in this situation?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and back to my point of looking at what's past and what's new as far as challenges for HR, right? And again, and thinking about the fact that the plates that are spinning above our heads are more now. I think that having a sense of what requires, I would say, some kind of quick fix, which could be training to manage virtual meeting technologies, which could be something focusing on more remedial, granting people access to this or that, or having people feel safe uh, coming back to the office if the case, right? Establishing policies for more flexibility or different working models for their workforce. That's where I see areas of quick wins. Let me put it very simply. But those related to the culture and especially the whole notion of what is it that we want to concretely offer and how do we want to normalize, how do we want to look like after things go back to after the big reset, those are things that you cannot stop thinking about.
Yeah.
And the great opportunity for HR to say, okay, we did that, so we resolved, we put off the main fires, but we are back to thinking strategically, and we are keeping an eye on trend A, B, and C that's going to impact the way our business operates.
I absolutely love that, because that is forcing. This is one thing that, by the way, that I've been saying for quite a long time with the Hacking HR community, and that is we need to be looking at things that are not necessarily in the HR space, because the HR space is such a small bubble of the real world. And you're talking about looking at trends, things such as, will we have a second wave of the coronavirus? And what are we going to do if we are we going to remain operating in the same way? Do we need to get new equipment? Do we actually bring people to the office if there's a likelihood that in 2 months from now that we have to go back to work from home? So those are trends that are not in the HR space, but they impact the operation of HR and the organization. So I'm loving that you're saying that. Nina, as we wrap up this conversation, there are a couple of questions that I want to ask you. One of them is, in thinking about building a more resilient culture, talking about the leadership that you talked about before, of being, bringing people together to work together in this VUCA world, and being more, innovative in the space of talent and HR. What if you were to say these are the three things that I think HR should be thinking about right now and maybe doing these three things, what would those things be?
Oh, great question.
That's a $2 million question.
That's a $10 million question. So let me say first, I think it's about staying on top of the trends without driving yourself crazy. Okay, very important. And keeping sight of the possible ramifications actually, because there will be multiple, not just to the industry or to the company, but to our roles ourselves. Very important. Okay, very easy to just go with the crowd because everybody's now talking, for instance, about online onboarding, and think that that's the next fire to put off. You lose sight of the strategy. So that would be one. I also think that not just for ourselves as HR, but also for our entire workforce, we just talked about the fact that digitalization is accelerating. But before COVID, we were anticipating that there's not so much technological fluency to sustain that. I mean, technology is evolving so fast, but we are not learning to leverage it, right? And
Yeah.
artificial intelligence is just around the the corner. So how do we upskill or reskill? You should think that just a few years ago, I don't know, 10 years maybe, cloud computing specialist or YouTube content creator were jobs that did not exist. Imagine after everything becomes more digital, right? And we start using artificial intelligence and simulators for a bunch of things, right? So there's that. And it would be short sight not to think about what's next.
Yeah.
And you ask for three. I think that the third is about watching our own sanity, reminding ourselves that we need to stay focused in that sweet spot, which is the intersection of what matters and what we can control. It's very easy to, again, to think that, oh my goodness, there's this fire there. HR has a reputation as a division or a segment in business to be the hand holder, right? But there are things we cannot control.
Yeah.
And there are things that don't matter. How do you filter through the noise? And think about an effort to not just filtering, but staying mentally healthy, because people need us functioning. It's almost like that analogy. I don't like it so much, but putting the oxygen mask on yourself first and then helping others. But you gotta stay focused, right?
Yeah.
And figure out what you're gonna do first.
That is I was actually going to use the same analogy because, you know, it's an easy way to just to represent the fact that we can't really take care of others if we're not taking care of ourselves. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, the HR people have a role to accomplish in the organization, but they are humans too. You know, they are moms, dads, single parents. You know, they have family members who may be sick, or they have lost loved ones, or they have some financial strain. And I like that you're saying, you know, take care of yourselves, because that's the most effective way for us to be able to help others as well. Mm-hmm. Nina, I'm going to ask you this last question to wrap up our chat. What are you the most excited about when it comes to the future? And what are you the most scared about when it comes to the future as well?
This is easy. This is not a $1 million question, and I'll tell you right away.
This is cheaper.
But great one. All your questions are phenomenal. I'm most excited about the future of work that we've been talking about and how it's going to look like. I think that there will be so many new jobs and so many opportunities that we haven't even imagined, right? And so much learning available. My goodness, right? The learning that we are able to extract from everything that's evolving all together. It's just that it's everything all together, truly. And it can be a little convoluted until we find we are done with the reset and move to the next phase. But and what worries me the most is the fact that there are leaders and organizations taking advantage of the excuse of everything that's happening.
Yeah.
Not just related to COVID, also related to other systemic issues, even the diversity issues that are happening out there. It's back to the point on transparency. Let's do a reality check and be transparent and espouse what we are saying. It is so important for our future. This thing of playing games. I mean, I hear such sad stories of people who are being let go because their manager had no idea of what to do with him or her, or had not addressed performance issues earlier.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it's not just an economical solution. It's really about the reputation of HR, the organization, and the industry.
Yeah, and I have to say, it concerns me too, because, well, you know, I mean, when people talk about changes happening bottom up. Yes, they happen, but if you have leaders that are actively engaged in opposing what the majority of the people want or the positive changes that we can have, it takes time, and it takes some effort, like how easy it would be for us to be wearing masks all over the place, but we have leaders that are actively engaged in telling people that wearing masks is not a good thing, or they shouldn't be doing it, or it's not mandatory. So anyway, that would be another conversation. But Nina, I appreciate your time. This has been a great chat, and I appreciate all your ideas and your insights. Thank you so much for being with me today.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for our next podcast. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching or listening to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please follow us on our social media and subscribe to our newsletter so that you can stay informed of all the things that we're putting together for you from the Hacking HR community. Thank you so much. Please continue to stay safe, stay well, stay strong, and we will see you soon.